I think that talking about NSFW, which stands for not safe for work, sexual content is important. Many people of all identified genders and biology feel happy about their body in this free and fair democratic society where sexuality is healthily discussed and debated. However, in my opinion there is an issue in that many nude arts and other photos and videos, even on adult websites, are not readily discussable in the media or in academia. There is a lot of amateur work, and pictures on sites online. That said, a lot of stuff is amateur and is left alone and never becomes touched or seen by many people who do not experience this joy. This is in my opinion a waste of people's beauty and body positivity. This is interesting because sexuality is so, in my opinion rightfully so, heavily debated and criticized while being allowed in many ways. However, unfortunately this only occurs at a certain level and extent, and in my opinion, society needs to go further, although this takes time. This time lag often occurs due to a need for deep consideration of self-debate and supraordinate goals. Technically speaking, many adult works and content are made online, but they are never cited as public domain. This means that lectures and other works that may forward a healthy society are not made or usable. For example, you need public domain nude or sexual art to talk about sex positions and their safety. In essence, there needs to be public domain sexual content so things can be genuinely discussed in a fair and equity-based society. However, despite most of the internet stereotypically being quoted as adult or NSFW, not safe for work, content, you cannot use it to discuss anything because the copyright is usually not mentioned, and due to such works involving a person's nude body positivity, something to be celebrated in all people, the strictest approach must be taken. This means that you assume that you are not able to often use the work at all other than comment or share it. A piece of work, image, or video found on something like OnlyFans, or even a free alternative cannot be used because technically it is their body, even though some individuals only post one image and video or erotic story and never return to their account to answer or respond to any requests to use their work in something like a critical commentary or academic lecture. I therefore often post nude art pictures and media such as videos to try to solve this issue, since healthy sexuality and discussion over it needs to become more mainstream and appropriate. This is not possible without more public domain sexual content, and I have therefore started doing this to contribute to this goal. Currently, many of the sources that can be used officially are sometimes something that is so old that the copyright has expired. I have had many bisexual sexual experiences in the past, and sexuality is important to me as a free-thinking rational individual with an awareness of the pros and cons of different types of sexuality, as a well-informed member of society. Let me know what you think about any of my content and criticize it in any way that you want. I will not report anyone because I consider this a part of the discussion and healthy criticism that helps me while I help society. Criticize, and if you troll, please troll respectively, because part of the reason I am making this audio vlog or podcast is because I believe that such trolling is sometimes representative of some unhealthy male or female obsession, or even some cultural artifact like the person suffering cognitive dissonance or irritation due to having the words to describe their unique reaction in a smooth, sophisticated, and slick manner. In some cases, the trolling might be a byproduct of media perceptions about sex, when in actuality it might be YouTube meme. I respect more conservative views, and to me this is part of encouraging debate. Some cultures view sex as a psychodynamic block like male and female energies. This is not a flaw of cultures, since when you think about something theoretical, there are few ways to do it from an anthropological and evolutionary society perspective. My proof of this might be early cultures who engaged in phallic worship, although I am not an expert. This is in comparison to societies like Greek society, where they had the Greek goddess of love Aphrodite, where sex was seen as more complex and multi-stepped. This, in my opinion, please prove me wrong, because that is a part of healthy society, responsible for making some societies weaker or less resilient in terms of supporting societal access to all members of society. This is because in actuality sex is complex. For example, you do not have a divine male or divine female energy interacting, because you have to think about time in a busy schedule, checking for STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, whether olive oil or baby cream is more suitable for sexual acts due to synthesized or artificial products, a need to check for allergies, or even debatably check up on whether a product, gel, or sex toy has had an impact on a partner, and whether a lack of cheap laundry services or washing machine and tumbler dryer availability, consider how many people are working class, limits sex to begin with. Sometimes with the latter in mind from a socio-economic perspective. Sometimes with the latter in mind from a socio-economic perspective. Arguing for the more conservative part of the sexual content debate, something else can be said. It is interesting to think that sexual content is a sublimation of irritation that is both good and bad for society. On one hand, a sexual content addicted person does not break their room or go to jail due to using sexual content too much. On the other hand, it could still therefore be a sign that people are still irritated and there are issues like undiagnosed learning disabilities and poor housing and noise in society. Sometimes living in a noisy environment that is sound or light polluted can ruin a child's sleeping pattern and upbringing. This is hard to report to a doctor and may be diagnosed as insomnia or a type of insomnia known as circadian rhythm disorder. In some cases it may even be a part of a disorder like bipolar disorder, which is mentioned in a text known as the main text used to diagnose issues, in medicine and clinical psychology known as the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, DSM-5. Alternatives such as the ICD-10, International Classification of Diseases, 10th revision, also exist. According to Mayo Clinic, bipolar disorder, formerly called manic depression, is a mental health condition that causes extreme mood swings that include emotional highs, mania or hypomania, and lows, depression. When you become depressed, you may feel sad or hopeless and lose interest or pleasure in most activities. These are important from an academic perspective because even when a disorder is recognized due to a need for standardization in academia and healthcare practice, some form of standardized form or interview diagnosis will, in my opinion, always exist. The reductive nature of the scientific method also means that these disorders are considered in terms of blocks like symptoms or blood tests and is biologically backed up with different symptoms being caused by different bodily or neuronal issues. This means that what is considered disorder can vary. This is not a conspiracy theory because you still need to deal with mass volumes of data, and as a medical doctor, hypothetically speaking, you cannot cry for 3 hours with the same person, although from a symbolic interactionism psychodynamic perspective, healthcare and organizations like the UK, United Kingdom, NHS can be seen as putting the patient first and aligning with Greek, Christian, or other important philosophies or doctrines like the Hippocratic Oath. This is important, because DEP ending on the method, clinicians might be more or less flexible in diagnosis, and it is a diagnosis which enables people with issues to access helpful elements like accessibility considerations and work and learning disability software, which many students cannot afford, being in the working class or low economic status, or migrant students, with people potentially using this to be employed rather than be unemployed in life. It is my opinion that every man and woman has a right and fanatical desire to be a part of society, and I call this phenomenon, if it does not already exist, societal accessibility threshold and societal accessibility gating. Societal accessibility threshold is defined by me as a neological term for the baseline or stereotype or norm that an individual conceives as allowing one to be functional in society. Meanwhile, the term societal accessibility threshold, a term I am coining here, refers to the amount of effort, money, or frustration a person believes they need to undergo and be able to physiologically or psychologically put up with to become or be considered a non-leeching, non-devious, praiseworthy, considerate, contributing and adequate part of society. With this in mind, I wanted to bring societal attention to something else. I think that people need to be more careful before making fun of leftists or people who might even be vulnerable, mentally ill, or lacking allostasis, and call other individual human beings snowflakes for making up terms like demisexual and pang-ender out of nowhere, or saying that the ivory tower and academia is simply a playground for rich people. On one hand, it is a sign of alertness in the same manner that one has to be alert for misinterpretation of scriptures or societal doctrines and not become an antichrist or al-Masih ad-Dajjal, or a person who is completely unaware of the goings-on in society, no religious offense or philosophical offense intend. However, consider this, 4chaners might love freedom fighters like Julian Assange, but such terms are important to such freedom fighters, although human rights activists do not call each other out, because sometimes you can only fight for one thing in your lifetime rather than everything all at once. You cannot have your cake and eat it too in many cases, even if you are a can't stump the Trump billionaire centipede like Donald Trump, whose presidency highlights a need for societal awareness on both every societal perspective. If a president of the United States can hypothetically be labeled insane or criminal by some, then it is bad, because sometimes, although rich people are seen as the guys ripping off the gravy train, the inherited wealth that never works hard, or the 1% who steals from the 99%, sometimes it is only these people who have the money or the master status to stand up for these issues without censure in the first place. The term master status in this instance refers to the master status of an individual is one which, in most or all social situations, will overpower or dominate all other statuses. This is a part of sociology and psychological theory, and people need to educate themselves using free educational lectures online. I am not talking about one person who is mega wealthy or a celebrity being allowed to roast nerds or hickomoris, or that guy who can take over all of a debate to the exclusion of other, but the fact that from a realism point of view it is the truth. Here is the trigger point. Think before you act. Consider that some human rights activists pretend to be gay or furry so that they can have a history of sane interaction with prostitution. I do not know if this is stereotypically being considered the world's oldest profession. I do not know if such women are really bad women, but all women are worth of respect and might be the mother of even a bastard child at the end of the day. Consider the Red Pill and MGTOW, men going their own way movement, and how some men deliberately pretend to be gay and wear an LGBT lanyard, so they do not have to be awkward around women in the workplace. Many of these men are not misogynist, but many females are socially more sophisticated and better able to communicate. Consider how, in ancient times, sharing child-rearing tips might be important. There is a saying in some religions, pray for the welfare of the government even if it is a bad one, because without them there would be chaos. Interpret that how you wish. Consider how people try to bribe Donald Trump's doctors and others in the media labeled him with narcissistic personality disorder, and how many poor activists can easily be sectioned without some form of status or protective affiliation in society. Consider how on one hand the banning and interference of websites like VOAT and the subreddit r/the_Donald might have influenced Donald Trump's re-election to a second term. This is purely spoken from an academic perspective. Consider how being a 4chaner from a contemporary psychology perspective might be a form of online master status, where people blame 4chan instead of you, but 4chan is 4chan, or lols is a form of kids will be kids, or normal people usually voice their issue responsibly. I am looking at you, internet. I am talking about the generation that made by Adolf Hitler. https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=6fs5zpsnbha Neon Genesis Evangelion openings, downfall memes, and Adolf Hitler epic rap battles of history. It is interesting from a running society perspective. On one hand, the war did happen, and genocides and the Holocaust did happen. On the other hand, perhaps, it was a way that this millennial era with massive levels of technological access produced their own version of playing with toy soldiers and boys being obsessed with being heroes and tin soldiers like older generations. With this millennial antics in mind though, consider how absolute freedom does not really exist, because superordinate goals exist in the sense that the birth control pill allows freedom and servers have a limited amount of memory, which means that they have to prioritize certain boards, topics, or issues based on access to resources like cheap memory, or more advanced compression and data and picture formats and algorithmics later being developed. According to the site Wikipedia, superordinate goals are goals that are worth completing but require two or more social groups to cooperatively achieve. There is indeed a hard line and balance to be had, since meme culture is important. However, before you see Julian Assange as a hero, and talk about pedagogy of the oppressed, remember to be responsible citizens and think before you act. Responsibility and politeness or joke medieval chivalry is sometimes separate from critical thinking because these functions are less limbic system accessible. Another contemporary biological term which I have coined and would like to develop further and expand upon separately later on due to not wanting to mention too many things at once. Before you make fun of terms like demisexual or pansexual and people's weird fetishes, please consider how bisexuals might sometimes pretend to only be gay so that they are not awkward around women, with many perhaps right-wingers being more likely to be awkward socially, or perhaps protectivity or draw to communities like MGTOW, men going their own way and red pill. Terms like demisexual are helpful to struggling activists and give gray rocking strategy to those struggling elements of society, which in my opinion do most people no harm. People often talk about just close the effing laptop, it's just an insult, but I think that it should work both ways. Some people can be physiologically hypersensitive for personality or biology-based reasons. Gray rocking is when you act indifferent and don't show your emotions. They may lose interest and stop bothering you. It is a term many human rights activists and millennials need to know, since it refers to strategies such as wearing clothing your boss does not like when work finishes so people do not get too personal with you. Consider a biological plausibility how problems like synesthesia exist, and a kind of like slonashy 40k chaos powers, or according to Wikipedia, synesthesia, American English, or synesthesia is a perceptual phenomenon in which stimulation of one sensory or cognitive pathway leads to involuntary experiences in a second sensory or cognitive pathway, and how some scientists think that foot fetishes and body part fetishes are a miswiring and closely related regions in areas like the postcentral gyrus, somatosensory cortex, where each body part has a region. It is true that this could be argued as a biological argument for it being wrong and a biological defect, but what if people are so poor or effed up that they cannot resist the urges, or people will still do it in secret? Perhaps there are ways to find maximized advantages and minimize disadvantage for this type of thing. It is my argument that it should be allowable, but, in my opinion, many responsible citizens of the West or elsewhere will skip their sexual stuff to pay the rent or visit a relative in a hospitable. Consider how for some people teenage rebellion is ripping off a hijab, and for some people their cherry bomb, popular teenage rebellion song by the Runaways termed cherry bomb, is draining their bank account on RuneScape's Wheel of Fortune or designer brands. Although this does not mean that video game high price items and designer brands should not exist. The video game industry, believe or not, was seen as nerdy and was funded by the adult industry in part, although I believe that the adult industry deserves to exist because it helps society along. For example, changes in diagnosis for disorders like neurodevelopmental disorders, intellectual disability, intellectual developmental disorder, autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder, specific learning disorder, motor disorder, psychotic or psychotic spectrum disorders, bipolar and related disorders, depressive disorder, anxiety disorder, obsessive-compulsive and related disorders. Here are my reference links: https://www.psychiatry.org/file%20 library/psychiatrist/dsm_APA_DSM_changes_from_DSM-4-2-DSM-5.4-T-R_2-4-5.pdf, https://www.ncbi.nlm.nih.gov/pmc/article/pmc39551266/$sign $, $20 R, for $20 older $20 adolescents $20 and $20 adults. Changes in the definition of ADHD in DSM-5, subtle but important. In some cases, it might involve psychotic or psychotic spectrum disorders. This is important from a political and human rights perspective, since human rights activists sometimes incorrectly or subverted by getting diagnosed with psychosis or another disorder, although adult content might actually have corrupting nature, or in my opinion be a wrong way to promote sexuality. Many STDs are not a threat due to cheaper or even free sexual health services in some countries, but a desire for sex outside marriage could arguably bankrupt a nation in theory. Sexuality, fake accusations, and slut-shaming have in the past, in my opinion, been used as a form of political control. However, this is my own opinion and I respect the opinion of others. However, this might lead to debate over the patenting and availability of sexual healthy drugs like HIV inhibitors, metronidazole, and azithromycin. Should these drugs be a priority for organizations such as the UN, United Nations, to be shipped out extremely cheaply? As a South Asian, it is interesting to think that in this regard, sexuality and embargoing of such medications in a world where internet access means access to pro-sexual forces are easily apparent in even sex-restrictive nations could be used as a hypothetical but hopefully unlikely geopolitical or economic weapon in the future. Issues like how often they might be used is also interesting when it comes to more effective generations of drugs or plausible sexual health drugs that might be used before rather than after sexual interaction. This might sound unlikely, but although bacteria mutate, some bacterial and other microbial proteins are restricted in their mutability, so this or some other strategy might become plausible in the future. It is interesting to think, and I am not sure, but countries like India, which have stricter sexual laws, might be synthesizing cheap generics while their own people might have less sexual health, and due to currency conversion rates a healthy profit might still be made, although safe working conditions would be a separate issue. This does not mean that India is wrong, because perhaps there are more pressing issues, and the culture might work best that way. This is not necessarily my position, but the words I am using might be limited because this is the only way I can describe it while typing, asterisk even for politeness' sake. Going back to my previous point on sexual interaction, being seen by some cultures as a corrupting force. It is important to note that this view is actually not childish when you examine it superficially. Traditionally, women were once unable to show even a thigh, but this is actually complex. I might make this into a separate video or essay, but it is also possible for the more liberal side to be accidentally discriminatory or less democratic to the more sexually conservative side. Although in the past women have been killed and things like eve-teasing and slut-shaming are common, it is possible to accidentally, through unawareness, stop or prevent the more conservative side of the sexual debate, even though when it comes to sexuality the chances of harm from other people when the more conservative side predominates is much greater than the more liberal side of the debate. There are various reasons for this, such as 1. Millennials engaging in binging of enlightenment-level psychodynamic forces like 4chan/B/ and Melody Sheep, a well-known playlist of videos known as Symphony of Science. Another is that when you in a cold climate like Russia or one like Africa or India where parasites and natural disasters exist, perhaps you culturally have to be more restrictive, and change on this is impossible from an official state perspective because the state might have to maintain the most survival-based form of bureaucratic philosophy that still has a positive spin to it. Philosopher Nietzsche once said that rhetoric is the price we pay for disparities in command structure. This could be applied to governments or even academic theories like organizational citizenship behaviors. Think about MLG, Major League Gaming, for millennials, being a millennial myself, and how you cannot really describe what it was, but at the same time it has an impact on us. Look at this video if you do not know what MLG is about, because these videos are now getting older. Some examples are https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=7pcftmuwvmq mine of duty trailer materialismo Legolas rages and quick scopes everybody. By Denix Pro https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=ss_awf_y4. Many people may have grown up motivated by MLG videos, and meme culture videos, or cartoon tribute videos, or abridged series like Yu-Gi-Oh!, the abridged series. Nevertheless, it would be wrong to make fun of a millennial who missed out on it due to factors like poor internet access or someone who was not interested in it. Yes, 4chan changed the world, but at the same time the board/b/random is memed as only being about porn, but it is also memed that a 4chaner should not use /b/ because it is useful. This is interesting from an academic thematic analysis point of view because on one hand 4chan is a bastion of free speech, which in my opinion it is. But on the other hand, to me it implies that when it comes sexuality that people have their own meaning of stop, it's going too far. Actually it is probably complex and there are other arguments that millennials and other people might put forth. I am going to put this on 4chan and I have an account on the video website https://odce.com and Wave Digital Arena. I would appreciate a follow, but it is currently difficult to discuss sexuality on YouTube in a safe, but appropriate, and civil manner that is non-demeaning to all involved. I have safe for work videos, but some of my videos are only visible by downloading the LBRY desktop or Android app on lbry.com and enable mature content in settings. I encourage manner people to use the site https://odce.com in conjunction with YouTube as a platform for free speech. It is an excellent site to use. This person then becomes unable to work although they are functional due to this. For example, many employers might want consistent and full-time employers. I am not an expert but in psychology. Here is a list of some microbial databases for the scientists or future budding microbiologists out there. Programs and databases like BLAST, UniProt, HAMAP, NMP-FAMSDB, MNIFI, EffectiveDB, PSORTDB 4.0, Patrick Database, Pathosystems Resource Integration Center, patrickbrc.org, RCSB Protein Data Bank, RCSB-PDB, Microbial Protein Interaction Database, BIDB, Interactive Toxinome Website, http://toxinome.pythonanywhere.com, Antimicrobial Peptide Database version 1, AMP v1, https://bibloserver.org.in/amp/. PSORTDB, part of the PSORT family, is a database of protein subcellular localizations for bacteria and archaea, https://dbaasb.org/home, https://www.exposae.org, ManDB, a microbial database, https://bactibase.hamamilab.org, https://mimedb.org, Microbial Genome Database, MELB, a database for microbial esterases and lipases, https://biopsych.org, preomics.com, Clusters of Orthologous Genes, COG, database, NCBINR database, Agnostos Framework, Genome Taxonomy Database, Antifam Database, Database V31, Metagenomic Cluster Database, Genome Non-OMIM, Uniclust Database, HH Suite Database, Eggnog 5 Database, Dark Proteome Database, Terra Ocean Microbial Reference Gene Catalog, OMRGCV2, FAM Database, Uniref 90 Database, the Genome Taxonomy Database, Uniclust, IST, Microbial Signal Transduction Database 4.0, Neuroscience Information Framework, Consensus Path DB. Also see, https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/list_of_biological_databases.